Good evening, and welcome to another historical version of Diatribes. Now here's your hysterical and histrionic host, voice of Doom. Hello. Alright, I'm going to keep doing diatribes because things are happening and I want to comment. And it's very interesting where my life is and where history is and where everything else is. Everybody's starting to lose it. And I'll tell you about that. But I wanted to give you a little historical information and comment on some things that I didn't comment on. Now, in what we used to call the United States, there's a tendency to have trends and have things go viral, and there's suddenly everybody's doing the same dance, everybody's doing the Wednesday dance on YouTube, everybody's, doing this or that, and people are very amazing and they do amazing things. But things seem to have a trajectory where they reach a peak of trendiness and then they fade. And that's why I want to talk about Petri dish, because things get stale and time worn, and Petri dish is stale and time worn. So I want to make a little comment before I get into my main theme about Petrie going to Morehouse College and commiserating to the graduates who are all getting baccalaureates, masters, and PhDs, all of people of color. He was telling them how they don't have a chance in this country because of the color of their skin, and that they're getting shot all the time and everything's against them, and they have to be 10 times better in order to get the same job as somebody who's Caucasian like him. So I look at what Orangey's saying in his things, and he's saying everybody has a chance to be successful and we're going to get this country back together again. Yeah, good luck. But he's more positive, even though he's a racist, white supremacist, misogynist cad who's a convicted felon. He's saying that everybody has the same chance at success as everybody else. Now, this critical race theory might have been nice for about 50 years, but the time has come where it's getting time-worn, dog-eared, and old. And the people that are the victims are the most tired of it. How long do you want to go the rest of your life saying you don't have a chance because you're black or Hispanic? You don't have a chance unless you're way, way better. So we gotta make special provisions for you in order to make things fair. Now we all know that's a big pile of crap. And Petri dish is dragging this old canard out of the closet and dusting it off and trying to do the same thing, pandering, condescending, patronizing young men of color who are just graduating, telling them you don't have a chance because of your color and I'm going to help you. Well, if he wanted to help, he could have done it already, huh? But he didn't, because he's been a racist all his life. One of the worst hypocrites in the history of this solar system. And that ain't hyperbola. But I wanted to offer Orangey some advice. If only he had listened to me 6 or 8 years ago, we would be living on a utopian planet. Everything would be great. With his brains and my advice and my wisdom, we'd be very good shape. But he doesn't know who I am, and it's best that way. Now, the verdict came down, and everybody's going this way and that way and the other way, and the right wings are all saying we got to fight back in the same way, and the left wing is all chortling and celebrating prematurely, because every time they do that, they end up having their bubble balloon burst. But I wanted to talk about somebody from the past and how it relates to Orangey. And I can't say that this is good advice. It's something to consider. But there was a man in history called Lenny Bruce. He was a comedian, a social commentator, and a satirist, such as me. But he was doing it back in the day when you couldn't say certain things and you got in trouble. If you were going to stand on stage and say certain words or make certain allusions, then you were going to be hounded by the powers that be, who were the right-wing conservative, Mr. Bobo back in 1955. All right, Leonard Alfred Schneider was born on October 3rd, 1925. He died August 3rd, 1966 at the age of 40. And he was a precursor to all these satirical, political, and out-and-out rude, and say what you want and see what happens comedians. He was the inspiration for people such as George Carlin, who was considered one of the greatest comedians ever. Now, I like John Cleese, but that's me. I just think when it comes to comedy and delivery and writing and slapstick and just all the things that all the comedians ever had to do, physical comedy, I think John Cleese is the greatest comedian in the history of the world. And he kind of thinks the same way I do, so I don't have a problem with him. But anyway, Schneider, aka Lenny Bruce, inspired people like George Carlin and Richard Pryor. And nowadays we have Dave Chappelle and other political comedians. Can't remember the name of the guy that does a really good impersonation of Orangey, but he's very hot right now, and his comedy is really funny. But comedy's dead, as Seinfeld said, because you can't say anything without offending people, and then they're going to have a problem and make a big stink out of it. But let's go on with Lenny Bruce. You would think he was a hippie, but actually he joined the Navy at 16 in 1942. He was on a ship in North Africa, Palermo and Anzio, which were all battle zones. In 1945, he did some comedy on the ship in drag, and he was discharged dishonorably for that, even though he didn't break any rules. And actually they do dress in drag on ships when the first sailors cross the timeline, or whatever the hell it's called. It's some drag thing they do. But at any rate, he was discharged dishonorably, and he appealed that, and he was given an honorable discharge after that. He was in the Merchant Marines in the Korean War. He was a roommate of Buddy Hackett, which only people my age or older know who he was, but Buddy Hackett was a funny guy. And they were roommates, and they did a little gig together. And that was his start. He did a few clubs and this and that. He was really too on the edge and on the fringe to actually be mainstream. He was not going to be on the Ed Sullivan Show. But let's go on. The partnership with Buddy Hackett was called the Not Ready for Primetime Players. So they used that phrase before Saturday Night Live would use it 20 years later. This is the late 50s. He was arrested for impersonating a priest in a charity scam because he wanted to get his wife out of prostitution, so he needed extra money because the comedy wasn't cutting it. And so he pretended to be a priest, and he was collecting money for a leper colony. And they tried to prosecute him, but they couldn't because it was a legitimate organization, and it was just a big mess. But he made $8,000 in charity donations and gave $2,500 to the lepers and kept the rest. So by today's standards, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was later arrested for obscenity in his comedy routine for using the word, shall I say it? He couldn't say it back then, cock S. He said that he was talking about the verbiage of to come, and people just didn't go for that, and the police came after him, and he was arrested. Now, here's where we get to the crux. Actually, Sherman Block arrested him in L.A. for using the word schmuck, which was considered a blue word where you can't use on stage. Sherman Block was the sheriff in L.A. He was once the highest paid elected official in the United States, and he was presiding over the 92 riots in L.A. after the beating of Rodney King. But that's a little aside, but I want to talk about Lenny Bruce because he did something that I think that Orangey should take heed of. And what he did was he got into these big legal entanglements, and then he got obsessed with the fact that he was being persecuted. And then his comedy routines consisted of nothing but him reading transcripts from his trials and talking about how the whole system's against him and obscenity laws and everything else. Now he got boring, okay? People weren't interested in that. They wanted to hear comedy. They wanted to hear cocksucker. They wanted to hear him talk about sex and this and that. Edgy things in the early 60s. And he was talking about his trials. So here's my advice to Orangey. Don't do the same thing. If people ask you about the trial, just say, I don't want to give that much attention because it was a joke. So I don't want to give it much of my time. I want to talk about the future of this so-called country and how we're facing rampant inflation, and World War III is right around the corner. We're in debt up to our eyeballs, and we're still giving billions to other countries to fight hopeless wars. The border's wide open. Anybody can come in and do anything. And issues of that nature. Don't even talk about abortion. Let people kill their kids if they want to. There's ways to do it. Don't talk about racism because all these people are coming to your side anyway. So that's my advice to Orangey, is look at Lenny Bruce and see what he did and see how he got boring with talking about his trials and going into great detail, and dying of a drug overdose at the age of 40 on August 3rd, 1966. We lost probably a great satirist who was the inspiration for Carlin and Mort Saul and other people that came after him. and he would have probably had a heyday with the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, but he decided to inject himself with heroin and die in the bathroom, which is the want of many celebrities. So, Orangey, if you're listening, don't get all obsessed with your trial. It was a kangaroo court. It shouldn't be given any attention at all. And if you were smart, you would stay away from that, because people who are jokes should not be given attention. You give these creeps attention, and then they just feed off that. So, I could be wrong. Maybe Orangey will get the crowd all riled up by talking about his trials, but just don't do it too much. Don't get obsessed with it, otherwise people will get bored with it, because trends go up and then they go down. And then all of a sudden all your people who are behind you will be going, I'm getting bored with hearing about your trial, because we all know it's a joke. So that's what I wanted to say, give you a little historical background, and give you something to be entertained with. I'll keep doing diatribes. Things are going bad. I'll tell you one thing. The lights went out at work, and I thought it was an EMP, because that's my first thought, and the lights did not come back on. And you realize how helpless you are when you don't have electricity, because we couldn't do anything. And there were still 70-somethings sitting at the tables, like acting like, well, I know the lights are out, and you were pretty much unable to do anything, but we'll hang around for a while and talk. That's the 70-somethings for you. It's all about them. I could do a whole diatribe about their miserable existence, but they didn't pay any attention to it. The lights went out. We still want to have drinks, and I was driving from work, and it was only a couple blocks where it was a blackout, but I noticed that all the gas stations were black. I went into Carson City at the border between counties. The gas station was dark, and then when I went into town, another gas station was dark. So I'm thinking, what the hell's going on here? I think we're going to see something big happening pretty soon. I heard something happen with the aircraft carrier. I don't know. But we'll see. In the next few days, we might see some real big things happening. Some big atom bombs. So, I just veered off there because I noticed that happened today. So, give me a comment, whatever, if you like this. It's, a little something from the past. Dustin Hoffman played Lenny Bruce in the movie Lenny. It was a pretty good movie. It wasn't a rip-roaring, blockbuster movie, but it was pretty good if you want to know the history of how these things happen. And Dustin is another liberal that's a very talented guy, so what are you going to do? Anyway, that's that. I don't want to go too long. Goodbye.